All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started to be mindful and respectful of everybody's time. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Kaylin Peterson. I'm the Executive Vice President of Public Affairs here for the Greater Bakersfield Chamber. So we're really excited. We have put together a small series of issue forums happening today and tomorrow. Today, this is the very first forum that we're hosting, and it's on the state of housing in Kern County. So really quickly, all attendees are in listen only mode, and we're just going to have a casual conversation today with each of our panelists. So really quickly, I'm going to introduce who we have today. So first we have Bruce Davis. He's the Senior Vice President of Bolthouse Properties. We also are joined by Derek Sprague. He's the CEO of the Bakersfield Association of Realtors. We have Nick Boone. He's the owner of Ascend Real Estate and Property Management. And we have Gary Crabtree, who is a certified general real estate appraiser with Affiliated Appraisers. So we're going to jump right in. So why don't we go ahead? Why don't each of you guys take a quick minute to further introduce yourselves, as well as just tell us a little bit about what your company or your organization does. So Bruce, let's go ahead and start with you. You are muted. Hold on. We just need to unmute you. I think that there's a little, oh, perfect.
Got it?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, too much technology on a Monday morning. At Bolthouse Properties, what we are a significant landholder here in Bakersfield. We own a substantial amount of farmland. In addition, we own basically the remaining development of Seven Oaks and the Stockdale Ranch master plan communities. In addition, we have commercial retail, commercial office, and other property and developments that we also own and manage.
Wonderful. Nick, let's jump to you.
My name is Nick Boone. I own Ascend Real Estate and Property Management. We manage about 650 units here in town, everything from single family homes to large complexes. We've done 200 unit complexes, and then just mom and pops investors that have a house that they want to rent out. We also do sales as well. I work a lot with Derek and Gary, and so I'll kind of just be touching on the rental side of things, how it's gone through COVID, expectations, and then kind of where we go from here.
Wonderful. Derek, let's jump to you.
Thank you. So yeah, Bakersfield Association of Realtors is one of the leading trade organizations in the area, and we represent the real estate industry as well as a lot of activities in the community. So our members are the realtors that are out there working with buyers and sellers every day, and we also operate the MLS. So we have close to 2,300 folks that are realtor members that make up our organization, and they're out there doing the typical business of residential. We also have members that are in commercial and land development as well, but you'll see the bulk of our folks working on residential.
Wonderful. And then last but certainly not least, Gary, why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Okay, I'm Gary Crabtree with Affiliated Appraisers. I am a real estate appraiser and have been so for, I'm on my 60th year in appraising properties in Kern County, California. So I have quite a bit of background, mostly in single family, and I have been doing research since 2002 on the market in general, and have been producing market reports for the community.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so let's just go ahead and jump right in. As you guys know, if you have something to add, feel free to do so. But Gary, let me start with you. As you know, the housing market kind of on all levels, local, state, and national, is sort of on fire. I was told this morning and read an article about a house in San Francisco that went for $1 million over asking price, and it was a 2,400 square foot house. Obviously, that's in San Francisco, that's not Bakersfield, but we are kind of starting to see a little bit of that happen here locally. So what would you say are some of the local trends that are really driving the run up here in housing prices?
Well, first of all, Bakersfield and really the Central Valley of California have always been the most affordable housing. We've had always cheap land, not so much anymore. However, we do have a growth that is taking place that is being caused really by COVID. Prices have been escalating in California to a point where the housing affordability rate is like 27% right now. That means that 27% of the median family income can afford a median family home. In Bakersfield, that's 45%. So we are considered to be almost the second most affordable in the state. And that has been causing people to relocate because of COVID. They can work from home. So they are relocating, and instead of paying $900,000 for a home in Orange County, they can come to Bakersfield and buy that same house for $350,000. So that's what's been driving our market, and we've had a severe shortage of homes on the market for some time. Builders are doing their best to try to keep up. However, the entry-level market, which was so attractive from builders or new construction standpoint, they've just basically run out of inventory. We've had the last entry-level home, when I classify entry-level, that's $250,000. The last entry-level home at $250,000 sold in June of last year. So the new median or the new mean for new construction for entry-level homes now are in excess of $300,000. So that's one thing. What's obviously driving the market is the fact that it is affordable. We're garnering buyers from all over the state, people from the Los Angeles basin to San Francisco to the coast. You wouldn't think that of Bakersfield, but money is a funny thing. It kind of is a driver of the market, and that's what's taking place right now. We've had a median price that has been in the 340s to 350 range. Over the last 2 months, we've seen a drop in that price, which is actually a function of the normal market, because during the winter months, we find that listings kind of dry up. People take their properties off the market. They don't want buyers and sellers, or buyers running through their houses and Thanksgiving or Christmas. So we actually experience a slight decline. And over the last 2 months, we've had a decline of 3,500 and another one of about 2,500. So our median price has gone from 345 down to about 335. But the sales volume has remained very strong during that period of time, which is a good indicator that demand is still out there.
Okay, fantastic. Derek, kind of switching over to you a little bit here. Gary touched on this, but from a residential perspective, what's the current supply situation? I remember, there was a time last year where we had some less than, 300 or 400 houses on the market. So how are your members specifically dealing with this lack of supply on residential housing?
I mean, and it's very connected to what Gary's talking about, because the reason that affordability is declining is because of a lack of supply. We've consistently been at a month or less of supply in terms of homes being available on the market. And one of the interesting things that I was just looking at over the weekend is about, if you look at what California's population was in 1986, there was 27 million people in the state. Now there's 40 million. But back then we issued 256,000 building permits. In 2020, we issued 100,000. So we've got, basically 13 million more people and issuing less than half the amount of building permits to keep up with that demand. And so because of that, you see prices increasing like Gary's talking about, and just a lack of homes that are out there to sell. But, I saw the New York Times published an article over the weekend about Bakersfield being affordable. I mean, it's just these other factors that go into that, but the lack of supply and really state and federal policy that makes it really difficult to build is what's causing the biggest issues that our members are dealing with. And essentially how they deal with it is just fundamentals of business relationships and trying to go out and, talk to folks. Really, the motivation for someone to sell a house right now, there's a lot of things that go into it, because what are they going to move into? Are they going to have a capital gains complication as a result of it? Maybe the interest rate, they were able to secure an interest rate on their loan now, and their alternative is going to be a little bit higher. So that impacts their decision. So there's a lot of interesting things that go into the motivation to buy. And as a result, people are staying in their houses a little bit longer.
And are you still seeing that happening right now, even throughout the pandemic?
Yeah, throughout the pandemic, things changed in the sense that some of the folks that we're talking about that are moving into town are able to remote work. And those are some of the examples that you see where they were able to get out of the urban areas and be able to enjoy a backyard and enjoy a little bit of space for their family. You're seeing a lot more people value that third bedroom because they need an office space to be able to work. So there are different dynamics, and it's going to keep evolving. But from what we see, basically the main thing is just trying to create the supply in order to address the affordability issues that we're talking about.
Go ahead.
Caitlin, if I may jump in just
Absolutely.
for a second, we talked about supply. As of December 1st, we have set an all-time low almost for housing listings on the market right now. We're at 327 listings. Now you look at that and put it into perspective, that's out of 130,000 single-family homes in the greater Bakersfield area. So there is virtually no product to choose from. And that's what's, of course, generating the bidding wars, which is driving up the prices.
Wow. So kind of jumping to this supply chain issue, Bruce, I'm coming to you. From a developer standpoint, how's this really impacting your ability to develop housing with some of your builder partners, to really be able to deliver housing to the community? And then also, how is it impacting you as a commercial developer to be able to deliver on some of the planned communities that you guys have?
Sure. From our perspective, I think it's really important to remember it takes about 2 years from the time if I were to sell you the property, for you to be able to go entitle it and then get your plans approved and permits approved for the horizontal infrastructure before you could even build the house. So there's this long gap between the inventory. If you recall, back in 2019, 2020, we had a very good sales year. There was a lot of absorption. We were hitting good targets. Gary could probably speak better to that. So during that time, as we rolled into March of 2020, we shut down because of COVID. Everybody got immediately panicked and stopped. Any transactions or capital expenditures going out were just immediately halted because it's such a substantial number and a significant amount of money that is going out. So there's a very conservative watch for it. Well, then about 3 months later, it didn't slow down at all. It actually ramped up for a variety of reasons, interest rates, in-migration, things of that nature. So what happened was there was that lag of development, slight lag of development there. And then as these projects come to fruition, there wasn't the inventory to get absorbed. And so the builders would be selling some of their product they expected to sell next year as they look into the land that they're going to buy. They have X number that they assume to absorb each year, and so they match their expenditures towards that. Well, as their absorptions exceeded their expectations significantly, then all of a sudden that left a shortage of land on the front end. And that's kind of what we're dealing with, some of that right now. We have a lot of developments within our 2 master plans. We have several building projects that are underway, lots of lots that are being developed and to meet the need, but yet there's no housing inventory per se being able to be put up. There's a limited amount in one of our projects. So what you're finding is just this cycle gap. And it's not like it's a normal course of business, and not that development or home building ever is normal, but there's sort of a cycle gap to it. And I think we're just trying to catch up to some of that. Now, that's also been exacerbated by the fact that we've had a lot of in-migration, but yet at the same time, the ability for builders to be able to predict when they're going to get their supply chain, the materials, what is the next shortage to come, it becomes very difficult. And so that's also impacting the development cycle of the homes, and there's a timing that goes into that. So everything is kind of counterintuitive. It's all positive things, with the exception of the supply chain. But and the fact that we have a nice market, the fact that we're getting recognition within Kern County is getting recognition outside of Kern County. People are moving here. It's something that we've all known living here, that it's a great place to live, raise a family, and quality of life. But people are starting to see that. People are starting to migrate to that, and for us, we're trying to catch up with the product with our builders. Now, there's a lot of properties that are also going on in the Southwest and other areas, and I think you're going to see that supply imbalance in terms of lots start to find its way, and then new home building in the very near future. But as far as the commercial side of it, from a land developer perspective, we're trying to work our way through the process.
Are you encountering a lot of frustration with your clients, or has there been kind of a level of understanding that there's supply chain issues, married with the pandemic, and everybody kind of just needs to be a little bit more patient right now?
Well, fortunately for us, we're not a home builder. So for me to be able to talk to the clients, that's not something I typically do. But there is frustration that, there's frustration. There's people that are moving here, for example, coming to work for us, have a very difficult time finding one of the 327 available homes that meets what they're desired to be here. As a healthy city, a healthy community, we need to be able to provide that opportunity and products for the people that stay. The goal for all of us is to have a community where our children will want to also raise their children and so forth. So that's a sign of a steady, healthy economy. And right now we're trying to catch up, and we're not quite there yet.
Okay, Nick, so considering everything that we know about the current housing market, from your property management perspective, what's it like to try and rent a property right now? If you're a renter, obviously we keep hearing that the new and the resale market is incredibly cutthroat, but is that translating into the rental market as well?
Yeah, even more so. I always joke with everybody that asks, it's, the sales market and buying a home is really, really tough. The rental market, in my opinion, is even tougher because unfortunately for the rental market, there's not a solid compounded amount of facts like the sales market. But anytime a property is listed for rent, an hour will go by and we'll have 10 people applying for it. On top of that, we've seen prices increase in rentals. We used to the golden rule for property management was about $1 a square foot. So 2,000 square foot house, $2,000 a month. Now it's $1.25, $1.40 a square foot. So in about 18 months, we've seen it go up 25 to 40% just with our portfolio that we manage. Some other property managers kind of shared the same ideas and facts and what they're seeing too, but it's as if not more cutthroat to rent a property as it is to buy a property right now. And part of that is because the same reason that Derek and Gary touched on is they sell their house and they need somewhere to go.
Right. So what's the solution? What do you tell people when, maybe they can't quite yet afford to purchase a house that's over $300,000, but there's also very limited supply on rentals? Keep trying.
Unfortunately, yeah. There's not, the solution is above my pay grade for sure.
Yeah.
But it's just a factor of, keep out there, keep applying. And these people are, paying $30, $40, $50 application fees to apply for properties, or, spending hours of time looking at properties to buy and not getting offers accepted. I mean, it's really, really frustrating for people to get into Bakersfield right now, whether they're renting or buying, or, I see across the board just the level of frustration that people are going through, and it's discouraging for a lot of people.
Jumping back over to Gary, we've obviously there was that article in the New York Times already about how there's a lot of relocations, and it's something that you guys have all kind of touched on here already today. there's kind of this perception, obviously, that people come to Bakersfield because of our affordability. Given the current market, do you think that our housing affordability as a selling point for coming to Bakersfield could potentially be in jeopardy? But really, are locals being priced out of the market here because of that?
I don't think so. The realtors that I talk with every day and we interview, they seem to be, when I always ask the question every time I interview on a sale and everything to get the terms and conditions of the sale, whether they're from out of town or they're from local. And I'm surprised at the number of locals that are buying, how those are really the locals that had bought entry level. And that house is now appreciated in price, so where they could actually move up in price into either a newer neighborhood or a more desirable neighborhood for them. So that leaves a lot of the, you would say, entry level market that would be vacant, but it's not. Just that's where everyone is buying, and we literally do not have an entry level market anymore. We used to define entry level as someplace around $200,000. That's a thing of the past. And so the people that are moving here are really expecting to pay more anyway. I mean, like I said, our median price in Orange County is $900,000. Los Angeles County is $770,000. The coast is $880,000. San Francisco is 1.2 million. Marin County is just broke 2 million last month. So this is what's driving our market, and we're finding that the people are, many of them are telecommuters. One thing that I did come across that is kind of alarming in a way, but it still doesn't seem to be phasing the people. The people that have moved to town that are telecommuting, their employers, now that COVID is kind of relaxing a little bit, their employers are asking them to take a pay cut to be able to telecommute from Bakersfield.
Oh, wow.
So low, although we have probably a lower cost of living, and I think that's what's compensating. I haven't heard anyone not say, no, I'm going to move back to Los Angeles and fight all of the crime congestion and everything else in the LA basin. So people like Bakersfield once they get here and they're accustomed to it.
Mm-hmm. Gary, how does this market compare to the run-up to the 2008-2009 market crash?
Well, actually, it's two different scenarios. The housing bubble was created, actually started under the Clinton administration. They were the ones that opened the gates for subprime financing and what have you, and it carried over. In Bakersfield, we were probably one of the worst hit. We had, in June of 2006, we hit $300,000 in a median price. In May of 2009, that median price had dropped to $115,000. So there was a 65% drop in the market, and at one time, 8 out of every 10 homes that were sold during that period were foreclosures. So we really went through it, and it's something that I've noticed over the past 50 or 60 years, is that as far as the economy is concerned, Bakersfield and the housing market seems to be the last one in a recession and the last one out of a recession. So it doesn't really compare, so to speak, because there are different dynamics involved.
Yeah, Gary, would you say also that we're in a much better supply position now too, in terms of the sales and the lots and the inventory? It seemed like during 2008, it was an oversupply based on a false market. This time we're exactly the opposite. We're undersupply based on an aggressive market. So it's almost healthy. It's a lot healthier, at least in my opinion.
I would agree, yeah, because I do remember that during the housing bubble and the crash and everything, at one time we had over 33,000 paper lots that were out there.
Some of them are still there.
And most of that has been eaten up and what have you. And so, you know, that's the problem. We've now run out of that inventory.
Right.
And we have a shortage of really land at reasonable prices. As an agent of production, lot value is one thing, but of course, the other parts of it is the very prohibitive impact fees that the builders have to pay. The typical 1,800 square foot house today, you're looking at $34,000 to $38,000 in impact fees. So just tack that right onto the sales price, plus all of the other code issues like fire sprinklers and mandated solar and so on and so forth. It's just causing our market to, and it's just not Bakersfield, it's the entire state of California and their policies.
Right. I think it's the affordability is more impacted here,
Right.
because of the percentage of the house price, but the same cost
Exactly.
that's layered onto it.
Mhm, mhm. This is kind of a question for everybody, but Derek, let's start with you. You know, what are your thoughts about infill development, and how much in demand is a more urban style housing in Bakersfield?
I mean, you've seen new product come out of the ground, especially multifamily stuff that's different than we've ever seen in Bakersfield before, you know, prior to this phase of what we're going through. So, I mean, I don't know if you necessarily point that towards the different people that are kind of moving to town or whatever it is. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a great time to identify some of those opportunities to, if it's infill development or redevelop, there's some really neat redevelopment projects that are going on. In order to both address the affordability question and also just create a really neat dynamic for the city. And that, I think the issue is identifying those properties and then taking them through the process. You know, you're sort of in the same process that Bruce talked about, where you're looking at 2 years to take a property and either develop it from the ground up or take something that's existing that's non-productive and make it productive now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts about, you know, whether or not there's this demand for more urban style of housing in Bakersfield?
I think, you know, from my perspective, what we see is a different market. Each generation changes. And I think what you're seeing is an influx of new buyers, not only from the external, but also the younger people that were previously would not, you know, their parents may not have been inclined for anything urban, but yet the newer generations, that's also something that's more attractive to many of them. So there's acceptance of new product, you know, that's been going on around outside of Bakersfield for many years, that we're just now seeing start to come forward in Bakersfield. I think it's healthy. I think it gives us a lot of new opportunities. So it'll be exciting times ahead as the market stabilizes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Bruce, land availability has always been a key component to our growth. How do state mandates to reduce, you know, vehicle miles traveled, greenhouse gases, and water use impact our ability to continue to expand the city?
It's kind of, it's unfortunate, and it's been ongoing forever. It's just one of those things that, you know, we have, one of our assets is we have a lot of available land within the city and the county that is effective and efficient to develop, but it's not being, you know, it's being penalized and punished by virtually everybody. You know, we're blessed to have a couple master plan communities here, and having that allows us to do things and create amenities that layer on to each other. Where if you're just buying 100 acres, 200 acres here, 20 acres, there isn't the continuity that you can get with some of the other products. So I think that what the government is trying to do, it may make sense in a lot of markets, especially the urban or well-established markets. It's kind of counterintuitive to the Bakersfield market. For us, it's been, you know, just recently, now we can build 2-story homes. It didn't used to be that was ever allowed, right, Derek? And so you're starting to see some change in what we see and what the buyers see. And I think that's going to help over time. But the government is not helping us at all.
Good to know. Nick, how have eviction moratoriums impacted your clients kind of overall and the rental market?
Yeah, it's been horrible. The So evictions are in full force now. So you can evict a residential tenant that has not paid rent with heavy stipulations now. So they have to have not applied for rental assistance. They have to have gotten denied for rental assistance. And the housing authority for rental assistance is 60 to 90 days behind. So you can't even file until they get an answer, which is 2 to 3 months from when you start the process to even get an answer. Then the courts are impacted for evictions because of how many are going on. So there's another few months. I mean, you know, I tell everybody evictions are legal now and you can do them, but they are not cheap. They are not fast, and they're very expensive for the owner of the property.
Interesting. This is a question for everybody. So Nick, we'll start with you and then we'll go from there. Will these market conditions, pressures on both the home buying and the renting populations, will they cause any negative consequences? More homelessness, housing as unaffordable as in other metro areas? I mean, what are potentially some of the unintended or negative consequences that we could potentially see coming down? Nick, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know about it going to homelessness. If there's somebody that had a $500,000 house that sold and needs to replace, likely they're not going to turn to homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll see a lot of people squatting, staying in properties longer, just simply because there's nothing they can go into. So we have tenants all the time where the owners will say, hey, we're selling the property. Hey, we're moving a family member in, and they'll offer them cash for keys up to $5,000 sometimes. And the tenant will say, I would love to accept your money. I have nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm. So
it's really, really tough. And that's something we explained to everybody too, is, you can offer them everything in the world. They're not going to move from a house to homelessness. So you got to solve that problem for them more so than giving them money almost.
Derek, what's your take? Any, potential negative consequences from this?
In real estate, everything cycles, right? So we've seen these different markets, and is there negative consequences? Is there going to be positive consequences? I think some of that is really tough to say. One thing that I think is the only certain thing right now is just the buyer fatigue that's out there and how that relates to, how people, their motivation to buy real estate and want to own their home, because it's really frustrating to be a buyer and put in 40 offers on a house to have a chance. But the dynamics are different now, and the dynamics will change in a year and in 3 years and 5 years. And it's just a matter of keeping up with that and seeing where it goes. So, yeah.
Off the topic a little bit, but are there any anecdotes or perspectives kind of coming from, your members or the realtor perspective on, what it's like to represent a buyer or a seller right now? Which one do you want to be, if at all?
You want to be a seller, because representing a buyer and being a buyer itself is a lot like just being in a big old lava pit. So we're not earlier this year in the springtime, we were in a market where I think the most offers that I heard was around 45 offers on a house, multiple offers that a seller had available to them to consider. And I know I've heard of more than that across the state. So we're not in that stage. We're still seeing multiple offers on listings that are out there, and listings are still selling for 100% or more of the list price. And I think probably the frustrating thing is the cash that's paid on top of a purchase price. And I know this is something Gary and I have talked about before, and how that impacts the value. I just heard last week someone talking about, now this was a house I think up in the Bay Area, but someone paid $1.5 million in cash over the list price. The price is obviously relative to their market, but to come in and have a list price and pay $1 million on top of that is just a whole different dynamic. And as a buyer, how can you really brace for that and plan? How do you go in and actually find something that you can fall in love with and deal with the heartbreak when you fall in love with it, put in the offer, and there's nothing that you can do to secure it because you're battling cash offers. A lot of our first-time buyers, one of the differences I think from 2006, when you're asking that question, is in 2006, I think close to half of the first-time buyers were able to get in with 0 down payment. And now that's virtually impossible. I think it's less than 3% of first-time home buyers right now are able to get a financing instrument where they don't have to put down a down payment. So they're skin in the game. That's a little bit different, but they're also up against people with cash that are willing to just put that down and say, no contingencies, buy it as is, don't worry about it, seller, just give me the keys and we'll call it a day.
Kaylin, there's a fantastic TikTok. If you don't have it, you can look it up on YouTube. It's about a guy selling an apple in the housing market, and it's like 30 seconds, and it's the funniest video you can watch on it, and accurate.
Good to know. Bruce, jumping back to the previous question, will these market conditions, in your opinion, cause any unintended, negative consequences?
Yeah, I think by the simple fact that we've raised in the level of affordability, as Gary mentioned earlier, now all of a sudden what you're doing is you're creating a gap between those that couldn't afford before. So that the buyers that are the people that can't afford that first house. I think as a city like Bakersfield, if we are not creating a housing product that our children can afford once they get out of college, get new jobs, then we're going to lose our children, and that's, to me, something as a community, as a city, as an overall aspect that I think we have to watch, like the gentrification, how that will occur. Sometimes it's inevitable. Sometimes it's forced upon us by external things, but that's the negative consequences. It's a wonderful time to be a seller. It's a challenging time to be a buyer. But as things settle, where they settle to the new norm, I think will have an impact as we go forward.
Yeah, it kind of really seems like the wealth gap is really increasing.
Yes, it is.
Within this market. Gary, how about you? What is your perspective on potential negative consequences?
Well, I think that going forward, we've got several factors that we have to consider. Number one, there is a significant amount of homes that are still under forbearance. So once those are released, there's going to be some of those people that have lost their jobs and they're not going to be able to make up their payments. And so those will go to foreclosure. So I expect that will be something that we can look for. It's not going to be a significant amount, but it is still going to be a little bit of an amount. As far as the market moving forward, one of the things that has happened is the buyers used to rely upon the appraiser and the appraisal process to keep the market in check. Well, that's all gone now. The typical buyer is bidding on properties, and so the offer usually comes in at 5, 10, 15, 20. The highest I heard was 65,000 over list price on a typical home. And so the appraisal is no longer a check and balance. The other thing that the GSEs have done is they have started issuing, well, they've been doing it for over a year now, appraisal waivers. So if you are a buyer, you have 20% down, you have a 760, I think it is, or 720 FICO, you can buy the home and there is no appraisal made on the property. So you don't know whether or not you're paying market value or what on the property. So that might be a shock to somebody when they go to sell in the future. But that's just the nature of the market that we see going forward. I think we will be in for a correction. When is anyone's guess? If someone asked me today, I'd say maybe at the end of 2023. But we have this dirty little thing called inflation out there, and that's eating into the dollar. It's reducing the net spendable income of the families, and eventually the interest rates are going to have to increase. I did a hypothetical the other day, and if the interest rates, which are in the 2.9s right now, if that increases to 4%, it moves just with the typical median family house. It moves Bakersfield's housing affordability index from 45 to 38%. So here's 7% drop in people that are not going to be able to afford homes, just with a little increase of interest rates to 4%. Of course, us old timers, we remember the days of Jimmy Carter when the prime interest rate was 16.5%. And that was the advent of the all-inclusive deed of trust. And
Wow.
people were buying financing instead of housing.
Wow. Derek, in other metro areas, professionals like teachers, cops, firefighters are really being priced out of the market. And we seem to be getting ahead of that scenario by starting programs before we're in crisis mode. So can you talk a little bit about the Realtors Down Payment Assistance Program?
Yeah, no, we were fortunate to be able to secure a grant of $50,000 from the California Association of Realtors and bring it back here locally to be able to give $2,000 grants to first-time home buyers that met certain income requirements. And we've been working through that, and really, I think the challenge is just trying to have all the stars line up between a first-time home buyer that's in that income range, be able to identify a house that they can actually qualify for, because as Gary said, that's a limited supply of houses now. And then, have all these things lined up to be able to deploy that grant. So I think that if we can identify more opportunities like that to be able to, infuse some assistance into that process, that's absolutely fantastic. And we're keeping an eye out for that stuff. And I know that there's other programs out there as well for farm workers, for within trade associations across the state. So really just a matter of trying to hit it at the right time.
Wonderful. Bruce, would you say that things have kind of gotten better or worse in the last 60 days since there's been a slight minor loosening of restrictions on ports? We talked about supply chain issues earlier, but are you guys seeing any measurable difference yet on any supply chain issues? The House passed a bipartisan bill at the end of last week, but any difference within the last 60 days on any of your developments?
Again, we're not building the homes, but we are doing infrastructure.
On the commercial side, yeah.
From the infrastructure side. Yeah, there's some change. And again, that's function of really what's the hot commodity that's no longer available at the time. But I think, I think we're going to be going through this for the next at least 12 months. And it's going to be something different at each time. I think our build times have been stretched out. I think our home builders are being as efficient as they possibly can. And I think that they're coming up with new creative ways that they can stretch it and to be able to accommodate sales when they can't necessarily have the garage doors yet, things of that nature. They're able to find their ways through some of these challenges. I think it's not something new now, and I think it's probably getting better rather than getting worse at this moment, other than trying to buy Christmas gifts, et cetera. But I think from a home building perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, we're also in the winter. So those of us on the West Coast, when it's the winter time, we keep going. And those on the East Coast are, unfortunately for them, unable to continue, which frees up some of the supplies of the commodities for us on the West Coast.
Mm-hmm. I have this question. I'm going to pose it to all of you. If you have something to add, are there any trends or policy issues that potentially we need to be concerned about coming down from either the state level or the federal level with regards to the real estate market on either side? Bruce, do you want to start?
I wouldn't even know where to start. There's always, I mean, there's a lot that's constantly, we're constantly being attacked, whether it's oil, gas, whether it's or from affordability factors, all these well-intentioned affordability projects and or climate and environmental projects. We tend to be whipped around by them a little bit more than the others on a percentage basis because of our affordability. So we're being punished for affordability in a lot of things. I think that we have, we as a city and yourself and Nick and everyone has really done a good job of trying to marshal together to create a voice within Sacramento. I'm not sure that they listen, regardless of how well we speak. And
They don't.
And so at this point, I wish I could say that I'm optimistic that something would come through, but honestly, I just is more like ducking. Hopefully that, that these things get stopped and delayed or deferred to avoid further challenges towards our affordability.
Mhm. Nick, did you have something to add?
Just an interesting take, Derek, you can put your sense in it too. They did come up with a new law that you can put an ADU, an additional dwelling unit, on any R1 throughout the state.
Right.
So I don't think we've seen the impacts of that yet. I don't know if, Bakersfield will, but Derek, if you want to touch on that too, that's something that.
Well, I mean, I think just the broader thing is that there's this desire to regulate or legislate our way out of a crisis. And
Always.
we need to do the common sense thing of just having policies that allow us to create supply and not try and put Band-Aids over gunshot wounds. So, the additional dwelling unit thing, being able to build out more units in single family residential, it's being done in the name to create more supply. And there's things that there's certain requirements in order to be able to do that. But the bottom line is, when you're trying to develop land into housing and you're in it for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars before you even put a shovel in the ground, it disincentivizes the building process and it makes it really difficult to add inventory. So, I think that's the hardest thing, is trying to figure out, there's these ideas, but let's address the underlying issue here and create incentives and common sense things in order to allow builders to build and get back to levels that we need to be at in terms of housing supply.
Mhm. Gary, how about you? Anything from your perspective, any trends, policy issues that we need to be concerned about?
Well, policy issues have been a problem all along, and they seem to be getting worse every year.
Mhm.
You take, for example, because of the forest fires, California has a policy that one size fits all for legislation. So along comes the forest fires. So what do? They jump on and mandate fire sprinkling systems in all homes. That's, a typical home, that's $5,000 to $7,000 that they just added to the price. And when's the last time you've heard of a house in Bakersfield burning down because of a forest fire?
Mhm.
So it's a one size fits all Band-Aid that hurts our market and hurts other markets just like it, but that's the same thing. Mandated solar is another issue. Builders are putting solar on, a lot of them are leasehold, but some of them that are putting on solar, because it's been mandated by the state, they're putting on 2 kilowatt units or 3 kilowatt units, which is going to be nothing. And the homeowner is buying, not knowing the fact that these people, once they start getting their PG&E bills and they're looking at $2,000 to $3,000 or $4,000 true ups at the end of the year, that's going to work a financial hardship upon them. We just don't have very many rocket scientists in Sacramento, and they just don't have the common sense that is necessary to address each and every individual area. We're the largest state in the nation, but they still treat it like we're still San Francisco.
Mhm. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said we don't have enough, for lack of a better term, smart people up in Sacramento. But we are lucky enough, I think, with our local representatives that are really doing a good job to represent our region up there. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I have one more question, and then if we get a chance, we'll try and ask a question or two from the chat. But this is kind of the big elephant in the room, the big question that you all have sort of touched on a little bit already. But how long is this market sustainable? Or is this the new normal? If you are a buyer, should you potentially be waiting it out for a potential decrease in the market? Should you go forward anyway and try buying it at all? Is this the new normal, and is this sustainable? Gary, let's start with you.
Short answer, no. The market is not sustainable, not under the current scenarios. I've already mentioned inflation. That's going to be an issue that is going forward, and we don't know how long the Fed is going to continue to print money. And so that is going to be an issue that's going forward. We have yet to see the tax policies of the new administration and how that's going to impact us. So eventually, I think that, like I think Derek said, it was a cyclable, and that's exactly what real estate is. It cycles, and there is no, it's not every 4 years. It just really depends on circumstances. You look at the recession in the 90s and everything, that was a recession that was caused by the downsizing of the military industrial complex in California. So that was a different situation. And then we had the housing bubble. And so each is a different scenario unto itself. But one thing for sure, what goes up must come down, and it's still, that Newton's law still works, unfortunately.
Mhm. Bruce, let's jump to you.
I think Bakersfield historically is one of the more stable markets in real estate than with a 2006 to 2008 exception throughout the last 2 decades. But I think, what we're looking at now is a function of in-migration. It's a function of shortage of supply and high demand and very, very favorable interest rates. So any one of those 3 things can, I think the supply and demand will become in balance over time, just because that's the nature of the free market. And it's sometimes we can't react quickly, but we will react as builders and developers throughout the city. But I think the interest rates will be a variable when and if they do increase, because now all of a sudden you're paying for interest as well as principal on your home. And it has a bigger impact, as Gary mentioned, back in the 80s and 90s. It was a substantial impact. So I think those are the things that I see out there, that it will stable. Bakersfield has plenty of land, plenty of opportunity, plenty of ability to develop adequate number of housing and unique products. It's just a matter of waiting for the time to catch up. And I think we're kind of in a catch-up period. It's gonna be over soon. There's a lot of activity, a lot of energy going towards that end. And so I think it's very favorable for the next year. And I think that interest rates will be the thing we have to watch.
Mhm. Nick, how about you?
Yeah, mine's a little different because rental rates aren't really correlated with interest rates. So, if housing affordability drops 7%, those same people coming to the market are going to rent something. So we haven't seen, historically when housing goes down. I mean, with the exception of 2006 to 2008, the rental rates don't go directly with affordability rates for buyers. So I don't think we're going to see a dramatic drop in rental rates. I think we're still going to have a lot of demand, even if interest rates go up for rentals. And, I don't think that that's going to be going anywhere, especially with increasing minimum wage and, people being able to afford more. Everybody talks about the gallon of milk going up. Well, rental rates go up too. So.
So potentially on the rental side, this might be here for the foreseeable future.
I think so.
Okay. Derek, how about you on the residential perspective? Obviously, Gary's talked about this already, but is this sustainable? Is this the new normal? And answer this question, because I know everybody wants to know, if you're a buyer, should you buy or should you wait it out?
I'm sure I'll get a ton of phone calls in a year.
I know, exactly. So. Like Derek told me.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, everything that from what we can tell is that we're going to see price appreciation continue, but sales volume decline. So what's that mean? There's going to be less activity in the market, but there's still plenty of demand, and there's a lot of demand waiting on the sidelines to jump in. So even if there was a dip in pricing, I think that there's more than a fair share of people that are going to be prepared to jump on it. So it seems like for the foreseeable future, we're going to see a market that continues to see prices increase. It's just the boots on the ground realtors are going to have less inventory to be able to go out there and sell. I think the wild card is exactly what everyone else talked about with interest rates and what someone can afford. And that's also relative to what Nick's talking about, because if you're looking at a rental that you're in that's now increased in price, several, whatever it is now. I mean, Nick, what's a 2 or 3 bedroom house renting for right now?
I mean, a 3 bedroom in Rosedale is going for 2,000 to 2,500 a month,
So I
which,
mean,
you know, a year ago was 15, 16, 1,800.
right. So I mean, if there's demand where people are paying 2,000 to 2,500 bucks a month, and they look at what if they can buy a house using that same payment, that kind of creates this whole thing where it's all relative together.
One thing that I have noticed in the housing bubble, when it crashed in 2009, we had a tremendous amount of outside investor money come into town, buy houses of foreclosures. They've fixed them up. They're renting them out. And during the last year, I've noticed that those same homes that they were being held for rental have now been put back on the market and been sold. And the investors are taking out the opportunity to move to other markets that are hotter, like Phoenix and like Dallas and like some of the other markets. So all of that inventory that was bought up by the iBuyer, as we call them, the investor, that's been thrown back on the market and has been sold. They've taken their gains and they're moving on to other hotter markets. So we don't have that issue. I don't think the iBuyers are back in Bakersfield buying up inventory. They found better returns on their investment in other areas of the country.
Well, we are right up against time. We've got about 2 minutes left. Is there anything else that any of you guys would kind of like our audience to know today? Or, I mean, we really did cover, you know, quite a few different issues, but if there's anything else that you guys feel like that you'd like them to know, please feel free, jump in.
I think, and Joel had a question from the chat. It says, when can we expect a shift to the buyer's market? Should potential home buyers wait it out? I get this question a lot. I'm sure Derek does as well, and Gary. 12 months ago, I had a lot of people saying, I'm not going to buy right now. I'm waiting for the market to shift. And now 12 months later, they're saying I should have bought 12 months ago. I would have made a lot of money. So I think even if, and I tell every buyer this when they get into it, if you're selling in 2 to 3 years, maybe now is not a good time. But you know, historically, if we look 20 years down the road at housing values in Bakersfield, they're not going to be where they are right now. They're going to be much higher. Mm-hmm. So if you're holding it long term and you're staying in it to live in for 10, 20, 30 years, there's no doubt. I mean, the prices will be much more in that time frame.
Mm-hmm. You guys have kind of touched on the fact that, yes, you know, the real estate market moves in cycles and things stabilize, but home prices are always going up. And I think that that's really the takeaway here is, you know, yes, we've got record prices right now and inflation and all of these things, but you're right, Nick, in 20 years, the value of your home's probably going to be significantly increased than what you'd potentially purchase it for today. So thank you all so much. This was a really, really fantastic conversation. I cannot thank each one of you for taking some time this morning to join us for this panel. We really do appreciate you guys. I'd like to just take a quick second to thank our sponsors, Chevron and Dignity Health, for sponsoring today's panel. And again, they're going to be sponsoring our panel tomorrow. You guys have an opportunity to join us tomorrow at 4 p.m. We'll be hosting another issue forum like this on the state of healthcare. So we have some fantastic panelists who will be joining us to really discuss where we are now and where we are moving forward as we continue through this pandemic. So thank you so much, Nick, Gary, Bruce, and Derek. You guys were fantastic, and we really appreciate you guys. So thank you.